What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bass. In today's video, we are talking about my top 5 baits for the month of December. Wintertime fishing. It is a great time to be out on the water. A lot of lakes around the country actually will drop their water levels in preparation for flood control for winter storms, but it's still a great time to be out on the water. A lot of times you will find that you're the only boat in the entire launch ramp, right? You're the only truck and trailer at the ramp, and a lot of times you will have those community holes or community spots all to yourself. Sure, you might have to throw on an extra layer or two of clothing, but it's a great time to be out on the water, and it's one of your best shots at catching the biggest bass in the entire fishery. So today we're covering my top 5 baits for the month of December. Now this is a huge video. It was really tough to do because wintertime, cold water bassin', you know, these fish typically are out a little bit deeper. They're kind of situated around hard cover rock. And there's a lot of key baits that I will run through my arsenal or my repertoire of just trying to check and trying to get these fish to commit. So getting it narrowed down to just 5 was really tough. So I might have added a 1 or 2 just in case you find yourself in a different scenario and you might not need baits 1 through 4, but you might need baits, 5, 6, and 7. So, but again, this is a great time to be out on the water. You typically have the lake to yourself. Bass are typically relating to offshore structure, rock piles, that sort of thing. So depending on the different types of fisheries you're fishing, the fish movement or the fish position might be a little bit different, but all of these baits will apply. Now, typically this time of the year, the colder the water gets, typically the clearer the water gets. So I'm, 99% of the time I start off with reaction and then I adjust or adapt to slowing down and finesse fishing. And that doesn't change even in the wintertime. You guys have heard us for years preaching about speed cranking and speed kills in the wintertime. And that is true right now. So I'm typically power fishing. I'm moving quickly. I'm trying to tap into or key into a bass's key predatory instinct to hunt or to react and kill, to ambush and kill. So even though your water temps might be in the mid to low 40s, when you bring the right bait quickly past a bass, even if it's not in that feed mode, typically a lot of times you can trigger that fish just on that core response to chase and lash out and eat. So that is what I try and do all the way through winter. So my number 1 bait this time of the year is going to be an A-rig, an Alabama rig. It mimics a school of bait fish. Again, these fish are typically, we teach that, the water's cooler, the ecosystem has slowed down, their metabolism has slowed down. There's not a lot of things moving quickly, but when you take a school of bait fish and you bring it by where that fish is ambushing from or hanging out, they typically will eat. And I haven't found a better bait, no matter what time of the year it is, than an A-rig. It just mimics a school of bait fish better than anything that I've found. So typically with the colder water, that's when I go away from a rig with a lot of flash and a lot of vibration. I go with a non-bladed rig, more of a natural rig. And again, I'm throwing this thing out there. I'm letting it sink to the depth I want it to be in. I might let it go all the way to bottom, and then I pop, get that thing going, and then I'm just reeling this thing, right? I'm not burning it. I'm not burning it, but every 5 or 6 handle turns, I will do either a rod twitch or a reel twitch. And what that allows this specific rig to do, this is our tactical flex rig. We designed it with lighter wires. It allows that school of fish to compress and then expand. So it compresses and expands a lot like a real bait ball. So that's why we go with that lighter wire. But again, adding those reel twitches, adding those rod twitches, even though we're in the dead of winter in December, will get you bit. Now, if you're on a fishery where the fish aren't that big or the bait fish are typically smaller, go with a little micro rig. That's our little micro rig compared to our mini rig. We have the micro and we have the mini, and then we have the flex rig, the full size. But typically I'm going with the mini, and then if I have to, I'll downsize to the micro. The benefit with the micro, a lot of guys are like, man, I don't like throwing an umbrella rig all day. It just hurts my shoulder, hurts my arm. When you go with a rig without blades on it and you go with a downsized rig, this is just like throwing your favorite half-ounce jig or half-ounce spinner bait. There's no really resistance or pullback in the water. But again, you're mimicking a school of bait fish. You got downsized baits. It doesn't hurt the limbs when you're casting all day, and that's a fun way to catch them. If I do have a little bit stained or dingy water, then I will go back to the blades, but typically I'm going with natural swim baits as well. But an A-rig is a great way to catch them right now. Number 2, this shouldn't be any surprise to those of you guys who have been following the channel for the last several years, but now is the time to be speed cranking. You know, there's a few different baits that work really, really well on the market. Wintertime crankbaits, you want a really, really tight wobble, a real quick kind of narrow wobble. You don't want that real aggressive kick on your crankbait. So we have 2 for you. The Megabass Deep X 300, real tight wobble. With the Megabass, you get the great colors, you get the lighter wire, just a really fine-tuned finished product. That thing gets down to that 12 to 14 foot range, and that thing is a killer. And then of course, you guys, we designed our tactical DD75 to get down to that 12 to like 18 foot range. Again, real tight wobble, real specific sounds, but the whole key to this thing is speed. So you throw this thing out there, get that thing down to that 12 to 18 foot range, and then you burn, pause. Burn, pause. Burn, hit or deflect off of a rock or, some kind of hard piece of structure, pause. What you're doing, this thing is burning past that fish, and when you pause it, that fish has one of 2 things, to choose from. Either lash out and eat it or turn away. But more often than not, when you burn this thing past them and you pause it right in their face, it's like, I think they feel like they've been spotted and they have to react. And 9 times out of 10 on that pause, wham, even in high 30, low 40 degree water temps. But a speed crank has produced so many fish over 10 pounds for Matt and I over the last few years. That is one of our favorite ways to catch them in the month of December. All right, number 3. Now, getting back to these fish in the wintertime, I talked about it earlier, rock, right? It's all about rock. These fish will pull out to main lake points. So if you have a main point that separates 2 river arms and there's a little rock pile out there, maybe it's the size of the hood of your truck or the size of your boat, those fish are going to be on that when they're up there feeding. Sometime throughout the day, they might pull off the side and suspend in deeper water, but when they're up there on that rock, it's go time. They're looking to feed. A couple other places I look for fish this time of the year. If you are fishing, say you're fishing in the back of a bay like we have out here, and there's an intersection point where basically you have a main point, but you have kind of that deeper channel, deeper water right there in the kind of the bowl, if you will. A lot of times those fish will hold in that deeper water and they'll press up to feed. They'll hold those fish back there in the arm. So I'll check those intersections. I'll call them intersections, where kind of those 2 little arms or fingers come together. Typically there's a creek channel or a deeper channel. They'll sit in that, or the face of dams. Even if you're a pond fisherman and you have a dam on your pond, go check that riprap. Typically the pond is the dam is the deepest part in the pond, and a lot of times with these colder air temps, those fish go down into deeper depths, and you can find them off of the face of the dam, whether you're in a highland reservoir, a lowland reservoir, or or a pond. So my number 3 bait, now that I kind of explained where I'm looking, I'm gonna go with a jerk bait. A jerk bait is one of those baits that, again, a lot like that crankbait and that A-rig, with those twitches, with that rig flexing, or with that crankbait speeding up and stopping, when you pause and suspend a bait like this above a fish, there's something hardwired in a bass where they're really intrigued. They want to investigate. And so you'll see they'll just kind of come up and look, and then rip, pause, let it sit there, and it just suspends. That's what's so great about this specific jerkbait. I'll talk about it in a second. But those fish just come up, and even though they're not aggressive, they come up and look at it, and then you rip it, and it goes to dart away. They lash out and eat it. This guy right here, this is the Megabass 110 Junior +1, a little bit bigger, deeper diving bill on there. For me, this has kind of been a staple the last few years, having that downsized jerkbait, but still being able to get down to those little bit deeper depths has been key. And again, just like I talked about in that crankbait, the Megabass 110, that is the standard in all jerkbait fishing. Being able to suspend this in colder water. A lot of guys probably don't know this, but depending on your water temps, it totally affects your float, sink, and suspend rate of your jerkbait. Okay, so these 110s are so fine-tuned. You can add little tungsten strips on there, little weight to them to get them suspend perfectly horizontal, if you will. But they're so dialed out of the package with their hooks, they suspend really well. So when we get into December, like we're talking about, we get into those cold water months, and some of our pauses are 10, 15, 30 seconds long. We don't want that bait to be down in 8 or 10 foot, and after 10 seconds, it's up in 2 or 3 feet, right? We want that thing down there and suspending in or above that fish's head, in its face or above its head, and that's what's key about this bait right here. I go really natural colors. Again, they have a lot of time to look at this suspended above them, so I like those ghosty or natural colors, okay? But a jerk bait works extremely well right now. Number four, just like all these, it was again, it was super hard to narrow down just to 5 techniques, because the wintertime, believe it or not, even though it's cold, I'm still running and gunning. I'm moving quickly. So, I might even be sweating. It might be 20 degrees outside. I'm layered up. I got good layers, a base layer. I got a hoodie, but I'm moving. I'm burning that crankbait or that A-rig, ripping it, that jerk bait. I'm active. So, you're not really cold out, especially when you're catching fish. But trying to narrow it down to just 5 techniques was really tough, because Matt and I, we've had so much history fishing all these techniques and catching really, really big bass and lots of bass. So I couldn't do this video without adding a swim bait. Now, the size of swim bait is totally up to you, right? So I went ahead and put a swim bait in this top 5, because those of you guys know out west, a lot of guys out here in the mountains, even out here on Chick, throwing a large profile swim bait in the dead of winter can produce some of the biggest bass that you've caught in your entire life. So whether it's the Savage Gear or the Huddleston, these guys are both great 8-inch size swim baits. Now, you will need some specific tackle. We'll link that stuff down below in the video description. But if you are a guy that wants to go out and get 1 to 5 bites, I mean, I've had 15, 20 bites in a day on a Huddleston, but for the most part, if you're looking for that bite, that key single bite, 1 to 3 to 5 bites and you don't have a problem throwing the big baits, I highly suggest throwing one of these guys. They are ultra realistic. You can see both of these have the wedge tail on them, that vortex style tail, a lot like the tighter crankbait kicks, right? Super slow. This is one of those baits that you don't get them to react to. These are more realistic baits. You have to trick them into eating your 8-inch swim bait. You're not going to get them to react. It's not like you're burning this. A lot of times we're down there in 20, 30 foot depths, just grinding this thing on bottom, just reeling this thing just slow enough that that tail is just barely kicking. It's an easy meal, but the drawing power, that's what makes these so special. The drawing power, especially in the wintertime when these fish don't want to burn a lot of energy, they don't want to expend a lot of energy hunting and chasing down stuff. The drawing power, a 10-pound or a giant largemouth will travel considerably farther to eat a big meal versus a small one. Okay? Now with that said, we've caught plenty of big ones on little swim baits too, but you have a lot more drawing power with these guys right here. So those are two great options if you're a guy that doesn't mind throwing a big bait and is looking for that wintertime just shock to your heart bite, that jig bite that you'll never forget, and then you load up on an 8-foot or a 7-10 to 8-foot extra heavy rod, and that thing just doubles over and you're grinding and that thing comes up, its mouth is this big. I promise you, you'll never forget it. And wintertime fishing, these guys can put that fish in the boat for you. Now, on the flip side, if you're a guy that doesn't have those fish in your fishery, or doesn't think you have those fish in your fishery, and you just want to go out and catch fish, you want to have a good time and maybe run into those giants, more power to you. Having a little 3 or 4-inch swim bait on a little guppy head will produce fish when some of these other baits won't. Sometimes those fish are just shut down, whether it's weather or just the circumstances. Sometimes you do have to downsize. Sometimes you do have to slow down. And that's when I like the little swim bait. I always have some type of finesse swim bait tied on, whether it's summertime, wintertime, pre-spawn, post-spawn, fall. I always have one of these, whether it's in the boat with me or in the backpack if I'm hoofing it and walking the bank. But that guy right there, a swim bait, will produce bites for you and can produce the biggest bites for you in the month of December. 1, 2, 3, 4. Number 5, for those of you guys that do want to slow down, those of you guys that do, I mean, they produce giant bites as well, but after I've ran through the A-rig, the crank, the speed crank, the jerk bait, the swim bait, and I need to slow down, I'm offshore, I'm fishing that rock pile, or I'm fishing that main lake point, maybe it's a bluff wall with a break, I'm fishing the rock off that, or the riprap along the dam. That's when I go with a jig. Some kind of jig. Now I say some kind because there's been a trend in bass fishing recently just downsizing everything, and I've had a ton of fun throwing a little finesse jig. That's got that little stealth craw on there. Let's do I have anything in comparison to? Let's see. Well, here's our tactical crank. So quite a bit smaller. You guys see that all right? You can see it in the hand. Now, there's plenty of times to be throwing a 3/4 ounce football head or a 1/2 ounce finesse football jig paired up with your favorite dead action trailer. And we'll link some of that stuff down below in the video description as well. But I didn't want to put too many jigs in this top 5 video, but some kind of jig, whether it's a little Kitech tungsten jig or little compact jig by Dirty Jigs. That's that Arky style head. Let me go ahead and open this so you guys can see. But some kind of compact jig. Now, there are definitely times when I like to throw a a heavy jig in the wintertime. And that's when you're doing that dragon technique down those intersections, those creek channels, off of the main lake point. But yeah, having some kind of head like that works really well as well. But those football heads work extremely well in the wintertime. Having that downsized, smaller package just seems, as of late for me, the last couple years, to get more bites. Now, there is a time and a place where I will throw just take a football jig head, and I will put a Yamamoto twin tail grub on there and just drag that. It doesn't have a weed guard. It's got an exposed hook. A lot of times those fish will just kind of show up on the jig this time of the year. It just kind of gets heavy. It just feels a little bit different than just the weight of your bait. You don't get that real hard, you know, dunk or tick or just knock the slack in your line. Sometimes you will, but a lot of times you won't. It just feels different. You reel down, and having that exposed hook, even if that fish tries to spit that bait out of its mouth, that exposed hook gets caught on the roof of the mouth or in the top lip, and it gives you that little extra time to reel down and set the hook. But some kind of jig, if you are a guy that needs to slow down and really pick through that main lake stuff, really pick through that key structure, that offshore rock, whatever it may be, a jig will get the job done. Again, I will link some of our favorite jigs, jig heads, and trailers down below in the video description for you. But again, typically natural colors on all of these. That's 5, guys. That's 5. But I do have 2 more for you, and I couldn't do this video without including these 2. One, because one is so popular right now and works extremely well right now, and the other has just taken really cruddy days for me and turned them into awesome days. So the first one, we're going to talk about strolling. Some kind of strolling bait, whether you're hover strolling or mid strolling or bottom strolling. I like to have something with a pintail or a straight tail that I can throw out there with or without electronics, throw out there, fish those key areas, same areas I'd be throwing a jig, and shaking that rod tip and getting that bait going side to side. There is something about these fish, you know, they have seen paddle tail swim baits for a decade or more. There's something to be said about a pintail bait, a two-toned bait that has a lot of side-to-side roll that will get these fish to eat when they won't eat anything else. So some kind of strolling bait. Again, it doesn't have to be used with electronics. It can work in your favorite places, wherever you throw your little paddle tail swim baits or your big swim baits. These guys will catch fish as well. And I'll be doing a more in-depth wintertime strolling video. But this is a little mooch minnow by Crush City. This is the 4-inch stroll shad from Hog Farmer. That's on a guppy head. This is on a little tiny range roller head by Owner. But again, depending on the depth of fish, depending on the size of the fish will determine, and how quickly you need to work the bait will determine the size of the heads you use. But having some kind of strolling bait for me is a must. So that is, put a little asterisk by it, that is number 6 for me. And then number 7, the jigging spoon. Guys, I've had those days where I've tried strolling, I've tried swim baiting, I've tried A-rigging, and just nothing works. And then all of a sudden, you look down on your 2D and you just see the lasagna. You're like, what the heck? Those fish they're right there on bottom. They're stacked like cordwood. You drop a dust spoon down there, hop, let it fall. It's a vertical jigging spoon, and it really shines all the way through winter. And there's something about having a dying bait fish. Even though this is 1 3/4 ounces, it doesn't fall like that. It still does that dying bait fish fall, and there are days when I cannot catch them on anything else in my entire boat, but I catch them on this guy right here. So I couldn't do this video without including some kind of jigging spoon. So here we have the Nichols dust spoon. Got a little swivel on the front to help with line twist. And then right here we have the War Eagle spoon. That's a 1/7, 1/8 ounce, a little bit smaller profile. Some days they want the larger profile, some days they want the smaller profile, but you fish them all the same. Whether you're firing them out and hopping them back, or you're dropping them straight down and just hop, let it fall on semi-tight line, let that thing do its death fall. And for whatever reason, in the cold days of winter, they will smoke a chunk of lead or a chunk of metal. It is crazy. So guys, I had to include that in my top 5, 6, or 7 baits for the month of December. But guys, don't be afraid to get out when it's cold out, right? Today, I'm actually fairly comfortable, but it's a high of like 48 today and a low, I think, of 26. But don't be afraid to get out on the water. Again, no one out. You get to go to those key spots and the fish will be active. I promise you. It might not be today, but maybe it's tomorrow or the next day, but you will catch fish all the way through winter. So don't be afraid to layer up and get out there on water. You pond fishermen or you shore-based anglers, kayak anglers, don't be afraid to get out there and walk or drop your kayak into some ponds. These fish still need to eat, right? So get out there. I promise you guys, with these baits right here, you guys will have success. Like I said, down below in the video description, I will link my favorite colors, specific tackle for each technique we talked about. But guys, that's my top 5 baits for the month of December. As always, we appreciate the support. Thank you for watching. If you like this video or enjoyed this video, hit that thumbs up. Down below in the comment section, I want to hear your guys' confidence baits. It doesn't necessarily have to be for December, but just wintertime confidence baits. I want to hear from you guys. And if you haven't already, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.